Hey guys, tonight we're pulling on scratchy woolen tunics, slipping into mud-caked boots, and heading deep into the medieval world to uncover what mental health, yes, mental health was like, when most people still thought bathing once a year was good hygiene. You're crouched by the fire, the thatch roof drips just a little, and someone outside is wailing again. No one's sure why. Maybe spirits, maybe sadness, maybe the moon's in a bad mood. You're about to find out why you probably wouldn't survive with anxiety in the year 1250. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far-flung or at some odd hour in your part of the world, drop your location and the local time in the comments. I love knowing where you all are drifting off from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air in your shared cottage is thick with smoke from the hearth and the scent of turnips. Not roasted turnips, raw ones. Someone forgot them in the corner again. You lie on a straw mattress beside your brother who twitches in his sleep. But it's the sound from the next room that keeps you awake. Crying, again. It's the neighbour's daughter, third night in a row. Her family swears she's been cursed. She won't eat, she won't talk. She just weeps and flinches when touched. Back in your time, someone might call this depression. Maybe trauma. But here it's more complicated and not in a good way. The town priest was by yesterday muttering prayers and sprinkling holy water. When that didn't work, he suggested penance. She's fasting now more than before and kneeling on cold stones to purify the soul. And you're just here watching all this unfold like, wait, aren't we missing a step? Like, maybe talking to her. But that's not how people think. In this age, emotions aren't personal quirks. They're signs, warnings, messages from heaven or hell. If you're too sad for too long, it must mean something outside you is pulling the strings. You see, there's no word yet for mental health the way we understand it. There are afflictions, torments, visitations. Melancholia exists, sure, but it's less about serotonin and more about unbalanced humours. Yes, those humours. Blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile like a Renaissance smoothie recipe gone wrong. And here's the kicker. If you're too sad, it might not be your fault. It might be a demon whispering in your ear. And if that doesn't get your pulse racing, a possessed person doesn't need to be foaming at the mouth or crawling on the ceiling to raise alarms. You could just be quiet, withdrawn, unmotivated. Sound familiar? But the tools for helping you are, let's just say, medieval. Picture this, a sickle of iron under your bed to ward off spirits. A chicken's heart buried in the yard. The local wise woman burns rosemary and says words that sound like Latin but aren't. If none of that works, you might get a priest who reads scripture over you until your ears ring. Historians still argue whether people truly believed these rituals healed the mind, or whether they just needed to feel in control of the chaos. Honestly, probably a bit of both. You wake the next morning to find the neighbour's house unusually quiet. No sobbing, no prayers, just a tightly shut door. The village isn't talking about it, not directly, but you hear someone mention she's been taken to the hills. That's code for isolation. Sometimes families would quietly send someone away, to live alone, to die quietly, or to a small hermitage if they were lucky. Out of sight, out of mind. Still feel like you're safe with your social anxiety, not so fast. A few years back, a man in the next village over was caught talking to himself, which honestly, in a world without podcasts or indoor plumbing, seems fair. But people said he was cursed. He swore he heard voices, maybe saints, maybe devils. But the church didn't risk guessing wrong. They held a trial. You weren't there, but you heard he was found guilty of heresy and taken to the monastery. He never came back. And if that sounds extreme, remember this was also the age of relics and miracles. If your madness looked holy enough, it could even make you famous. Some saints were canonized because of their visions, which if you squint sound a lot like psychosis, auditory hallucinations, mania, even delusions of grandeur. Julian of Norwich claimed to see Christ bleeding on her wall. Hildegard of Bingen wrote music dictated by angels. Were they chosen, or simply experiencing something science today would diagnose differently? Historians still argue whether these visions were divine encounters or spiritualized symptoms, but no one dared call them mad. So you learn early there's a line, a dangerous invisible line between being blessed and being broken, and no one agrees where it is. One wrong twitch, one offhand comment about shadows at night, and you're either kissed by God or doomed by Satan. Your neighbour's daughter. She crossed the line, but no one will say how or why. They'll just nod solemnly when her name comes up. Maybe light a candle, maybe avoid her family for a while. You feel it, don't you? The tension, the not knowing, That constant anxious tightrope between behaving just normal enough and drawing the wrong kind of attention. In a world where inner suffering has no name and no safe place to land, you're left to navigate the storm by instinct and superstition. And you can't help but wonder who's next. You're in the church now, crouched near the back pews because you didn't want to draw attention, but you had to see this. A man is kneeling at the altar, sweating through his linen tunic, even though it's cold enough to see your breath. His face twitches, jaw clenched, and every so often he jerks violently as if slapped by an invisible hand. The priest walks in behind him, slow, deliberate. A Bible in one hand, a flask of holy water in the other. You've heard whispers about this man. He used to be the town scribe good with numbers, always humming to himself. Then something changed. He stopped sleeping, stopped eating, started screaming at invisible enemies in the street. He bit his own arm 2 nights ago. The priest has declared it possession. You're watching what people back then considered treatment and exorcism. He isn't tied down, yet. But you notice 2 strong boys from the village fishermen with thick arms lurking nearby just in case. The priest begins reading in Latin, his voice slow and full of authority, like he's been practicing in front of a mirror. Vede retro Satana, he says. Step back, Satan, the scribe snarls. You flinch. Not because you believe a demon is being drawn out, but because no one in the room is asking what actually might be wrong with him. A breakdown, schizophrenia trauma from who knows what. That vocabulary doesn't exist here. What does exist is fear. Fear of the unknown, the irrational, the unexplainable. And what humans fear, they try to either destroy or sanctify. In this world, the line between the sacred and the sick is razor thin. The medieval mind didn't really separate the body from the soul. If something's wrong with your thoughts, it must be a spiritual problem, a punishment, or worse, an invasion. That's why priests, not doctors, were often the first line of mental health care. Because madness was framed as a moral failure, or a metaphysical one. If you felt sad or angry or couldn't control your impulses, then surely something had gotten into you. And let's be honest, priests loved the drama, the chance to fight evil directly. That's career gold, even if the person in question was just having a very bad month. Now, of course, not every priest was a zealot. Some were probably quite gentle. Some might have even offered real comfort. But the structure they operated in didn't give them the tools for nuance. It gave them scripture, incense and ritual, and told them to go fix the bleeding soul. You shift on the wooden pew feet numb, trying not to cough from the incense smoke curling through the air. Suddenly the man shrieks, a high animal sound. The priest flicks holy water across his face and the man writhes half choking. You hear someone mutter, "It's coming out." But you don't see anything except a man who looks terrified, confused, and very, very alone. Historians still argue whether exorcisms were genuinely believed to be effective treatments, or more of a social theatre to reassure the onlookers that something was being done. Because letting someone unravel publicly, that's dangerous. It shakes the fragile order of a world held together by religion, hierarchy, and shared fear of the abyss. You're starting to notice a pattern. Mental illness in this time is never just about the person. It's about the community, the church, the village's uneasy need to stay tidy and explainable. The man collapses forward, gasping. The priest closes the book, declares victory. People murmur and nod like they've just watched a miracle, but you're not so sure. Because from where you sit, he looks worse than before. Exhausted, hollow, like someone who's been acted upon, not helped. Later that day, you hear they've locked him in a small back room of the church. Just for a few days, they say. Just until he's calm again. You know what that means, alone, cold, and likely forgotten. And what if the next time it's you who breaks? Let's say you start waking in panic, your chest tight. Maybe your thoughts won't settle. You've seen what happens to people who talk too much about what's going on in their heads. So you keep it quiet. You walk it off. You bite your lip and say your prayers. Maybe you ask your mother if she's ever felt like the devil is sitting on her chest at night. She goes pale, tells you never to say that again. Not even in jest. And you get it. The danger isn't just in being unwell, it's in being noticed while unwell. Fun fact. Some medieval thinkers did try to define emotional suffering more scientifically. Avicenna, for instance, a Persian polymath, wrote about mood disorders in the 10th century. He even proposed treatments involving diet music and fresh air. Unfortunately, most of Europe wasn't reading him. His text would be translated and passed around centuries later, but here in your dusty village, you're more likely to be treated by a priest than a physician. Unless, of course, you've got some money. Then maybe a local scholar will show up with a cure. That'll come later. Right now, all you have are prayer salt circles and being told to confess your sins. Because if you're sad, angry, fearful or trembling, it might not be a medical problem. It might just mean you've opened the door to the devil. And when that happens, best case scenario, a few prayers and some rosemary, worst case. Well, people disappear all the time, don't they? You walk home that night from the church, your head buzzing. The stars above look far too bright, too sharp. You wonder how many people around you are silently unravelling, putting on normal faces, saying amen like everything's fine. You wonder how long you can pretend, and you can't help but glance behind you just to make sure no one's watching you too closely. The next morning you wake to the scent of boiling. Something turns out it's pig's lungs and barley again, and the thud, thud, thud of your neighbour's footsteps pacing outside. He's on edge. His wife's been sad, he says. Won't get out of bed, barely speaks. You saw her last week at market. She looked pale, thin, like someone stretched too tight over a frame of exhaustion. And today finally he's doing something about it. He's taking her to the barber surgeon. Yes, that's right. The man who sharpens razors and pulls teeth also does a brisk business in balancing the humours, because in this world the body's made up of 4 slippery, moody substances: blood phlegm, yellow bile and black bile. And if your mind's off, well, your fluids probably are too. You follow along pretending to need a new knife edge, just to see. The barber shop smells like iron and lavender. There are bloodstains on the table, dried ones. The woman is already sitting on a 3-legged stool, eyes blank, as the barber lifts a copper bowl and mutters something about excess melancholy. Black bile, he means. That's the culprit in most mood problems, apparently. You've heard the theory before: too much black bile makes you weepy, withdrawn and fragile. Too little, probably something worse. People don't like when you're too happy either. So the answer: a little bloodletting naturally. He ties off her arm with a strip of cloth, nicks the skin with a curved blade, and lets the blood drip into a basin. No gloves, no questions. She flinches once but doesn't cry. You can't decide if that's strength or surrender. She'll be told to rest, maybe eat something warm and stay away from stressful situations. That part's not so bad. But there's no sense of why this happened, just that her fluids turned evil, and now they've been drained like a storm barrel. Humorism wasn't just a theory, it was the theory. It stuck around from ancient Greece well into the Renaissance. Hippocrates laid the groundwork, Galen doubled down, and medieval Europe basically built an entire wellness industry on it. What's wild is how normal this all seems to you now. They bleed people for everything. Fevers, headaches, nightmares, being too chatty. Imagine going to urgent care and being told you're just a little too phlegmy emotionally. Historians still argue whether people actually believed in the humours, or if it was just the best vocabulary they had at the time for things no one could explain. Either way, it gave structure. People like having reasons, even if they're made up of mystery juices and guesswork. There's also trepanning, though you don't see it today. That's when a small hole is drilled or scraped into the skull to let the demons out. Sounds horrifying now, but in this time it wasn't considered particularly outrageous. There are even skulls with trepanning marks that show signs of healing, meaning people survived. Probably felt worse afterward, but hey, they survived. You ask the barber casually, trying not to sound too interested, what happens if someone's sadness doesn't go away. Well, he says stroking his chin, that means the balance is deeper. Might need a laxative. Or purging. Yes, purging for mental illness. That means inducing vomiting or sometimes diarrhea to get rid of those dark moods. Think of it as medieval gut health with absolutely no probiotics. Just rhubarb root and prayers. You ask him if he's ever seen someone so melancholic that nothing helped. He gives you a long look. Aye, he says, some folk carry sorrow like a stone in their gut. Heavy and slow. Naught you can do but wait for it to pass or weigh them down so deep they sink. You shiver, not from the cold, from the recognition. That night you overhear someone say the woman is sleeping again. Eating even. Maybe the bleeding worked, or maybe just doing something gave her permission to rest, to stop pretending. You hope so, because in this world, if the melancholia lingers too long, the next steps are darker. Less about healing, more about hiding. People are moved quietly, shuffled to convents, sent to live with distant cousins in the country, or worse, accused of madness and made to stand trial not for a crime but for scaring everyone too much. You think of your own quiet days, the ones you don't speak of. You wonder if you'd been born a few decades earlier, would you have already been bled, leeched or exorcised by now? You wouldn't be alone. There are records, actual manuscripts, where medieval doctors describe case after case of melancholia, mania or furor. One even talks about a noblewoman who claimed the moon spoke to her and told her secrets. Another describes a monk who danced alone in his cell until his feet bled. And the treatments were always the same: balance the humours, drain the fluids, correct the temperament with warmth or coolness, moisture or dryness. If you're hot and dry, you get cooling herbs. Cold and wet, maybe fire cupping or mustard plasters. Sometimes they work. Sometimes people get better on their own. And when they do, it reinforces the system. See, the humours were off. Other times, well, they're just gone. You lie awake later, staring at the thatch above your bed, wondering if you've got too much black bile. Wondering if you'd even know. You feel okay mostly. But what if you weren't? What would you do? You're realising now how fragile it all is. How easily sadness becomes suspicion. How quickly confusion turns into ritual. And how terrifying it must be to live in a world where the only thing between you and an invasive surgery is whether someone thinks your tears are holy or sick. You close your eyes, just for a second, and you dream of blood dripping into a copper bowl. It's been 3 days since the barber bled your neighbour's wife. She hasn't come outside since. Some say she's resting. Others whisper that the melancholy came back stronger, heavier. You're not sure what to believe, but you notice her window's been shuttered day and night. No candlelight, no singing. That's when the word convent starts making its way into the gossip. You've heard about the convents. Holy places, yes, but also repositories for women who didn't quite fit the mould. Spinsters, widows, daughters who spoke too much or not enough. And yes, those labelled troubled. It's a gentle word for something darker. You remember your cousin, quiet, devout, always reading psalms aloud. One day she claimed to see angels outside her window. Everyone laughed at first, until she stopped eating, until she started talking about wings made of glass and golden eyes in the well. She was 15. They sent her to a convent near the coast. You haven't heard from her since. The idea is this cloistered life is peaceful, structured, holy, and if someone's struggling with grief or madness or a mind unravelling, then surely the sacred rhythms of monastic life will mend them. Prayer 7 times a day, bread, water, silence. Surely that will bring order to the chaos. But deep down you suspect it's not about healing, it's about removal. You picture the convent gates closing behind you, the iron latch, the silence, the centuries-old stone that smells like cold bread and mildew. The other women, their faces blank, moving through routine like ghosts. In some ways it might be safe. No one expects you to make decisions. You're cared for. Your days are carved into ritual and no one asks questions when you stare too long at a candle. But it's also a form of erasure, and the thing is not everyone there is truly mad. Some are simply inconvenient. You've read enough between the lines to see the pattern: too opinionated convent, too emotional convent, refuse marriage, definitely convent. And if you happen to have visions or hear voices, well, that's the express lane. Historians still argue whether convents functioned more as sanctuaries or prisons. Some were undoubtedly kind, even healing. Others, you wouldn't send a goat there. But either way, they were often the only option besides the street or Bedlam and Bedlam. Well, we'll get to that soon enough. You imagine your cousin now. Maybe she's grown used to the bells and silence. Maybe she likes it. Or maybe she wakes every morning hoping it was a dream only to remember it's not. You wouldn't know. Letters from convents are rare and censored. Still, society tells itself it's doing the right thing. Cloistering protects the fragile mind, they say, gives space for the soul to heal. And sure, it sounds lovely when a nun speaks of divine contemplation. But when a young woman is sent away because she cried too long after her baby died, that's not spiritual retreat, that's exile. The church has always had an uneasy relationship with suffering. On one hand, pain is holy. Christ suffered. Saints suffered. So if you suffer, maybe you're closer to God. But if you suffer wrong, too loudly, too inconveniently, it must be corrected. Or hidden. You've heard of anchorites too, people who voluntarily seal themselves into tiny rooms attached to churches devoting their lives to prayer. Voluntarily, usually. They're walled in with a window for food and a hole to watch mass. That's it. Sounds peaceful, until you remember they live like that forever. One woman, Julian of Norwich, became famous for her writings about divine visions. She was an anchorite. But not everyone who sealed themselves away was a philosopher. Some were simply seen as unstable, and it was considered safer for everyone if they stayed put. You get the feeling that the medieval solution to a troubled mind was often reduce the stimulation. Remove the temptation, silence the noise, which in fairness might actually help some people. But the cost: autonomy, community, identity. There's no therapy in this world. No safe room to cry in. If you're lucky, you get prayers and herbs. If you're unlucky, you get locked behind thick stone and forgotten. The worst part, everyone thinks they're helping. You wonder if your cousin was relieved at first. A soft bed, regular meals, a space to breathe. But you also wonder how long it took for the silence to become a weight, for the rituals to become cages, for the visions to fade or deepen, and what happens when the church decides your visions aren't holy anymore. One nun you hear was burned for heresy after claiming Christ told her to stop listening to her abbess. That's the thing about visions, they're only tolerated as long as they align with authority. One wrong word and suddenly your divine insight becomes demonic delusion. You think of your neighbour's wife again. Whether she ends up at the convent or not, her role in the village has shifted. She's now the one who broke. She'll never fully be trusted again, and that mark doesn't wash off no matter how many prayers they say. Still, there's something tragic about the logic of it all. The belief that silent structure and isolation can heal a wound no one can see. That by removing someone from the world you can mend their mind. You wonder if centuries from now people will look back at our treatments with the same mix of horror and disbelief. Pills that fog you out, institutions that over-medicate, the ways we still try to quiet the symptoms without asking what caused them in the first place. Maybe the past isn't as distant as we like to think. That night you dream of a stone corridor lined with candles. You walk past door after door, each one whispering your name, and behind one your cousin's voice soft-tired humming a psalm. You wake up with tears on your face, and for the first time you say her name out loud. Just once. You're back at the village square watching a barefoot woman dance in slow, deliberate circles near the well. Her eyes are glassy. Her dress is torn soaked at the hem. She murmurs something with each turn, something about burning wings and the blood of the lamb. Children are giggling nearby. Adults are pretending not to watch, but they all are. You wonder, is she mad or miraculous? Here's the uncomfortable truth about medieval times. No one quite knew where inspiration ended and insanity began. The line between sainthood and schizophrenia. Paper-thin and easily torn. Some called women like her holy fools, divinely touched, perhaps even chosen by God. Others called them heretics, witches, or worse. And often the same woman could be both revered in one village, condemned in the next. You've seen this woman before. She used to work with wool, spinning for hours at the edge of the common green. She was quiet, kept to herself. Then one spring she stopped spinning. Started singing instead. Not songs phrases, snippets. She wandered from house to house, quoting scripture and sometimes saying things that weren't in any Bible you've read. The friars say she's ill. The old women say she's blessed. The blacksmith just shakes his head and mutters, "Best leave her be." You get the feeling this is her only option, because there's something oddly powerful about the way she moves. No one tries to stop her. No one interrupts. Madness, if performed convincingly enough, becomes untouchable. Historians still argue whether such women had real agency, or were simply tolerated as long as they didn't disrupt things too much. A wandering mystic is fine as long as she doesn't start questioning the bishop's authority. That's when trouble starts. You edge closer. She's talking to the well now, telling its secrets. And for a flickering second, something in you believes she knows something. Something important. Then she laughs, a high cracking sound, and the spell breaks. You glance around, the crowd's thinning. The baker's boy is pretending to sweep while clearly watching her with wide eyes. A pair of men whisper to each other and walk off. You can feel it, an unease settling over the square like fog. Not because she's dangerous, but because no one knows what to do with her. It's easier when madness is private, contained. But this is public, embodied, on display. There were saints like Marjorie Kemp who made their madness part of their devotion. Marjorie wept constantly, had visions, travelled to Jerusalem shouting and wailing. Some thought she was possessed, others believed she was chosen. And she wrote it all down. Or rather, she dictated it. It became one of the first autobiographies in English. And yet even she was told by clergy to sit down and hush. Too much emotion, too many visions, and suddenly your holiness becomes inconvenient. You think back to a story you heard once. A woman in a nearby town believed God spoke to her through birds. She started preaching nothing scandalous, just love thy neighbour, with a side of bird metaphor. People came to listen, then the church came to investigate. The next you heard she'd been silenced. Whether that meant imprisonment, exile, or worse, no one said. You wonder how many people walk that tightrope each day. Feeling something inside them expand something raw and terrifying, and deciding whether to speak or stay silent. Whether their breakdown will be seen as a message from above or a disease from below. Some gamble, like the woman at the well, and for now she's safe. Because she's just strange enough to be tolerated, but not yet strange enough to be feared. There's a part of you that envies her, her freedom, her surrender. But there's a sharper part too, the part that knows this can't last. Eventually someone will say she's cursed, or spreading unrest. And then, well, you've seen what happens. The church doesn't take kindly to messages it didn't approve. You remember a fringe tale barely mentioned in dusty manuscripts about a woman who wandered naked through a castle claiming to be the Virgin Mary. Rather than execute her, they built a tiny stone hut beside the moat and left her there. She lived like that for 20 years. People would toss food in when they remembered. Quirky detail, she apparently gave prophecies that came true more often than not. But since no one could explain it, they just shrugged and left her to rot. You stare now at the woman dancing by the well. Her spinning has slowed. Her lips move in prayer or possibly poetry. A small dog circles her feet yapping, and then she stops, points to the sky and whispers, "He's listening." And just like that, you feel something crawl up your spine. It's not fear exactly, it's recognition. You've had those moments too, the ones where something inside you floods the edges of your mind and you think, if I don't let this out, I might burst. But you don't dance by wells. You bite your lip. You stay quiet. You function. Mostly. But maybe in this world she's not as far gone as they think. Maybe she just broke first. Or maybe she is chosen. And you're just not brave enough to listen. As night falls, someone gently leads her away. No chains, no punishment. Just a guiding hand. Tomorrow she might return. Or not. And the village will keep spinning like a dance circle after circle round the same old questions. You head home trying not to think about what it would take for you to cross that line. One loss. One sleepless month. A grief too heavy to carry. And more importantly, would they let you dance too? It starts with tapping. At first, it's just one person. A young man from the outer farms barefoot and flushed patting a steady rhythm on his thighs. You spot him near the marketplace grinning as he shuffles in tight jerky circles. His parents try to lead him home, but he swats them off and keeps dancing. By dusk, 5 more have joined him. The next day it's 20. They call it choreomania, a dancing plague. And you are now in the middle of it. You're not dreaming. This has happened before. The most infamous outbreak was in Strasbourg 1518, when hundreds danced for days on end. No music, no rest. Some dropped dead from exhaustion. Some just kept going. And now it's happening here. You're standing near the well, the same one the barefoot mystic danced around not long ago, watching a crowd of villagers sway and twitch and leap. Their faces are blank, their bodies soaked in sweat. They don't speak, they don't stop, and somehow it's contagious. You feel it in your knees, your ribs, your fingertips, like an itch inside your muscles. Some say it's the devil, others say it's Saint Vitus punishing sin or answering prayers. But mostly it's just terrifying. Someone starts chanting, someone else laughs, then weeps. The blacksmith's son strips off his shirt and spins until he collapses in the mud. No one knows why this is happening, and the explanations are all over the place. Is it spiritual, a mass possession? Some say the dancers are offering themselves to heaven or surrendering to hell. Is it physical? Maybe something in the rye, some bad bread laced with mould, ergot poisoning, a medieval LSD if you will. Historians still argue whether these outbreaks were medical, psychological or mystical. And frankly, from where you're standing, it might be all three. You think back to last week when the village was already tense. Food's been scarce, tempers short. A baby died. A priest fell ill. People are carrying grief in their bones, and it's like something inside has finally snapped. Maybe this dancing's a release. Maybe it's madness. Or maybe it's just what happens when emotions fester too long without an outlet. In this time, there's no therapy, no breathwork, no journaling. So when something inside you starts boiling, you either scream pray or apparently dance. The bishop arrives by midday. He stands at the edge of the square robes, flapping clearly horrified. You half expect an exorcism, but instead he prays loudly and tells everyone to stop. They don't. He leaves. Later that night, the town elders decide to herd the dancers into the chapel, thinking holy ground might calm them. But when the doors close behind you, the energy intensifies. Feet pounding, bodies thrashing. Someone smashes a candelabrum. Someone else vomits on the altar. And still they move. The air inside is thick with sweat and incense. You're pressed against the wall watching a girl no older than 13 shriek a hymn in reverse. Her voice cracks. Her arms shake. She looks directly at you for a moment and then twirls away weeping. This isn't joy. It isn't art. It's a breakdown in real time. Eventually the dancing slows. A few collapse. A few wander away. One man is carried out, limbs twitching, and the rest, they rest, sleep like corpses. And in the morning they're different, hollowed out, eyes dull like something burned clean through them. There's no clear aftermath, no arrests, no sermons. Everyone just sort of agrees to not talk about it, as if naming it might bring it back. But for weeks the fear lingers. You notice people moving carefully, laughing less, watching their own hands too closely as if worried they might start tapping on their own. You ask your neighbour what he thinks caused it. Witchcraft, he says without hesitation. You ask another, she shrugs, as too much sorrow she whispers. And maybe that's the truest answer, because life here is heavy. Grief, poverty, hunger, war, it's all pressing down. You don't have the language to call it trauma. You just feel it quietly eroding the edges of you until all that's left is movement. You think of animals trapped too long, how they pace, how they shake, how sometimes the only thing they can do is run in circles until they drop. And maybe humans aren't so different. You try dancing once, just a little, alone in the woods. It doesn't feel freeing, it feels dangerous, like unlocking something you might not be able to close again. So you walk instead. Miles and miles past fields and frozen ponds trying to shake off the echo of that chapel, those bodies that sound. But it stays with you. You remember one moment especially. A woman middle-aged humming as she spun. Her eyes were closed. Her face was wet. And for a second she looked completely at peace. Maybe this was the only way she could survive. You'll never know what snapped that week. Whether it was divine punishment, poisoned grain, or just a communal scream with rhythm. But you know this something real happened. Something that words couldn't explain. And sometimes when you hear a rustle in the grass or a tap on your window late at night, your heart skips just a little. Because deep down you're afraid it might start again. And this time you won't be able to stop. The forest is quieter than usual today. No birdsong, no rustling leaves. Just the sound of your boots crunching through half-frozen mud as you walk the familiar trail to the old healer's hut. You're not sick, at least not in any way that shows, but your chest has been tight for days. Sleep is patchy, thoughts are noisy, and after the whole dancing incident you're not taking chances. They call her Mother Cilia. Not a doctor, not quite a midwife. She lives alone near the edge of the forest, surrounded by herbs and animals, and enough jars of dried something to build a very suspicious apothecary. You knock on her door with the kind of reverence usually reserved for saints or wolves. She opens it slowly, peers at you, then gestures inside. And just like that you've entered another world. The air smells of smoke mint and old fabric. There are bundles of thyme and lavender hanging from the beams. A crow sits on the windowsill judging you. And somewhere in the back something bubbles in a pot that probably isn't soup. Not fever, she says before you even speak. Not cough. You've got a noise in your chest. You blink, she's not wrong. Mother Cilia, like many women in her trade, works in that murky space between medicine and magic. Some call her a witch, others call her wise. And frankly, the two labels often meant the same thing in medieval times. She asks you to sit, then begins preparing a tea made of crushed valerian root-dried rose petals, and something she calls moonseed, which you're 90% sure is a made-up name, but you're too polite to question it. As the tea steeps, she talks. Mine can go crooked like a tree bent too far in wind, she says. If it bends too long, it don't spring back. You nod partly because it makes sense, and partly because she's holding a knife and slicing something that resembles a beet but smells like sorrow. In medieval Europe, the village healer was often the closest thing to a therapist. Not that the word existed, but people still needed to talk. They needed reassurance. They needed someone to say, yes, you're not crazy. You're just tired. You're grieving. You're overwhelmed. And if that came with a dash of nettle tonic and a poultice, even better. Historians still argue whether these wise women were truly respected or merely tolerated until they stepped out of line. Some were celebrated. Others were dragged to trial for heresy. All it took was one death blamed on a bad charm, and a lifetime of healing could be undone in a single accusation. But until that happened, they were vital, especially for mental afflictions. You sip the tea, it's bitter, then oddly sweet. Your jaw unclenches almost involuntarily. Mother Cilia doesn't push you to talk, but somehow the words come. You speak of your sleeplessness, the dream of the chapel, the heaviness that hums behind your ribs like a second heartbeat. She nods, never surprised. Sorrow likes to sit in the belly, she says. It makes you hollow, then full, then hollow again, like a storm you can't see. You ask her if she believes in demons. She shrugs. Some thoughts feel like demons, but I think most are just thoughts that got stuck. You feed 'em fear, they grow teeth. You sit with that for a while. Her remedies aren't magical, but they're practical. a sachet of lavender to hang by your bed, warm stones for your stomach, honey with ash bark to quiet your dreams, and perhaps most importantly instructions to return next week just to talk. In a world of priests and punishments, of bleeding and binding, Mother Cilia offers something rarer: listening. You wonder how many lives she's saved simply by giving people a space to fall apart safely. You help her gather herbs before you leave. She teaches you to identify St. John's wort for sadness, she says, and feverfew for when thoughts chase themselves like dogs. You press the leaves into your palm, feeling something like control return to your fingertips. Before you leave, she gives you a charm, a simple cloth square with dried poppy seeds and a feather sewn inside. It's not magic, she says, but if you believe it helps sometimes, that's enough. And maybe it is, because belief after all is the real currency of this time. The belief that a tea can calm your mind, that a chant can banish fear, that your broken thoughts don't make you broken. You walk home through the darkening forest, the charm warm in your pocket, the scent of herbs still on your skin, and for the first time in weeks your breath feels deeper, your mind just slightly quieter. You won't tell anyone you visited her, of course, not openly. The church frowns on wise women, especially those who speak of minds and spirits like they're soil and weather. But you'll go back, because somewhere between faith and folk medicine, between mysticism and mushrooms, there's something that feels like healing. And in this world, it's worth everything. You wake up to birdsong. Not imaginary ones this time, real ones, flitting between the thatched eaves, chirping like nothing's ever gone wrong in the world. The lavender sachet Mother Cilia gave you is still beneath your pillow, and for once you've slept straight through the night. But your peace doesn't last long. There's shouting in the street, angry voices, the sound of boots and dirt. You throw on your cloak and step outside, heart already thudding with that now familiar maybe this is it dread. A man is being dragged toward the centre of the village. You recognise him barely. He's one of the miller's sons, the quiet one. His tunic is torn, his hair's matted, his eyes are sunken, and he's muttering nonsense under his breath. Something about teeth in the sky and numbers that bite. It would almost be funny if it weren't so horrifying. No one is laughing. The priest stands nearby, arms crossed. The devil's got him, someone says. The boy shrieks suddenly, and you flinch. Not because of the volume, but because you understand it. That raw sound, that's panic. Not possession, not sin. Panic the kind that claws at your chest and convinces you the world is cracking open. But again, this is medieval Europe. There's no such thing as a panic attack. So they call it madness, and madness is dangerous. This time it's not prayers or bloodletting, it's restraint. The blacksmith brings thick rope. They tie the boy's arms and legs and lash him to the old post near the alehouse, the same one used for public punishments. It's for his own good, the priest says, but it looks a lot like punishment. You step back instinctively. You've seen what happens next: spitting, stones, ridicule dressed up as righteousness. The boy's mother sobs behind her hands. No one meets her eyes. There were in fact rudimentary mental health institutions in medieval times, but they weren't what we'd call hospitals. They were more like holding pens, and the most infamous of them all, Bethlem Royal Hospital in London, known far and wide as Bedlam. Even the word survived. You've heard it whispered, he belongs in Bedlam as shorthand for lost causes, and from what you've gathered, it's less a place of healing than one of spectacle. Historians still argue whether Bedlam's worst horrors have been exaggerated by later writers, but we do know that by the 14th century it had started taking in patients labelled as lunatics, fools, and distracted. The conditions, let's say, not ideal. You imagine yourself there. Cramped rooms, screams echoing down corridors, people babbling, laughing, weeping, all blended into one thick, terrible noise. No privacy, no safety. Just endless days of waiting for help, or worse, for nothing at all. The miller's son isn't going to Bedlam, at least not yet. But he's already lost his place here. No matter what happens, he's now the village madman. And even if he recovers, if the fog lifts, people will flinch when he walks past. You wonder how many recoveries go unnoticed. How many people fight their way back to stability only to find the door to their life closed. Once marked, always marked. Back at the post, the boy has stopped struggling. His head sags. He's whispering now words you can't catch, but that sound familiar. They sound like prayers. Someone tosses him a crust of bread. This is what passes for care. And the frightening thing, it could have been worse. In some places, restraint turned to punishment quickly. People were whipped, caged, even branded on the belief that madness needed to be driven out through pain. The idea that mental illness could be managed kindly was not widespread, but here and there you've heard of gentler attempts. In Islamic hospitals of the time far from your muddy village, patients were sometimes treated with music, scent and conversation. These were called bimaristans, and some even had gardens for patients to walk through. A luxury, yes, but proof that another path was possible. It just didn't reach here. You watch as the boy's father kneels beside him, presses a hand to his shoulder. No words, just presence. And somehow that simple gesture feels more healing than anything else you've seen all day. Later they untie him and take him home, quietly, no triumph, no miracle, just another bruised human being still breathing. And you're left wondering how many people like him are hiding their unravelling behind blank faces, trying to hold it together, terrified of being tied to the same post. You included. That night you sit by the fire with a piece of stale bread and try to make sense of it all. There's no clear enemy here, no villain twirling a moustache, just ignorance, fear, and the human need to label what we don't understand. You think of Bedlam, the echo of screams behind stone, the lonely ones tied down because they felt too much or too deeply. You think of the boy and his whispered prayers. And you think of yourself how close you've come to tipping, to breaking, to dancing, or screaming, or collapsing. But you haven't. Yet. It's raining the next morning, soft, drizzly, the kind of rain that makes everything smell like old wool and ash. You wrap yourself in your cloak and step out anyway. Something's pulling at your thoughts. A memory. A phrase. Something about lunacy. It clicks as you pass the churchyard. Luna, the moon. It sounds poetic now, but in medieval times that connection was dead serious. People truly believed the phases of the moon influenced the mind. More specifically, they thought the moon could cause madness. A full moon, bad news. A blood moon, worse. If you lost your temper, lost your words, or lost your mind, someone somewhere would blame the sky. You glance up. The clouds hide it for now, but you feel it anyway, that slow swelling pull behind your forehead, as if your thoughts are following a tide you can't control. There's an old man near the edge of the churchyard. You've seen him before. He talks to trees, laughs at birds. He has a scar over one eye and never wears shoes even in frost. Today he's humming. You sit nearby pretending to pick moss from the stones, but really just listening. His song has no words. It flows like water. You catch yourself swaying just slightly, and for a moment you forget the shame that usually coats people like him. He's not dangerous, not wild, just elsewhere. But people call him moonstruck. A dangerous thing to be in these parts. The theory of lunar influence wasn't fringe science, it was mainstream. Respected medieval scholars like Isidore of Seville wrote that the moon's phases caused seizures and madness. Physicians advised families to be cautious during full moons. Even the church occasionally echoed the belief, warning parishioners to stay indoors when the moon was high and pale. Historians still argue whether this belief was superstition astronomy or just a way to time bad luck. But one thing's certain, it fit. The idea that something beautiful, distant and untouchable could affect your thoughts felt strangely satisfying. You remember a story from a nearby village. A woman who was calm for 28 days, then suddenly screamed every night for 3 in a row, like clockwork. They called her silver-eyed. The priest tried to bless her. A healer gave her crushed pearl mixed with milk. Nothing helped. Eventually they locked her in her home during full moons. She lived that way for years. You never knew her name. Back at the churchyard, the old man has moved on to clapping. His rhythm is off but deliberate. You wonder what world he lives in, what moon he orbits, and whether in that world his thoughts make more sense. It's hard not to feel a kind of kinship. You've had those nights too when your skin feels too tight and your dreams buzz like flies, when the world looks just slightly crooked and you wonder if maybe it's not you but everyone else that's tilted. There's something oddly comforting about lunar logic. The idea that your feelings rise and fall with the sky predictable, traceable, like weather or seasons. But the comfort fades when you realise what people do with that belief. Because moonstruck didn't just mean eccentric, it meant cursed, feared, a reason to isolate someone, restrain them, burn their possessions, blame the moon and forget the person. You hear of another case from a wandering monk who passed through last year, a man in the hills who painted stars on his walls and refused to eat during certain lunar alignments. He was chained in the town square for disturbing the balance. The monk said they left him there for 7 days. It was raining. That story has stayed with you. Now watching the old man clap, you wonder, is he aware of the risks? Does he know how close he is to being seen not as a person but a pattern? You hope he stays harmless, because the minute someone blames a cow's death or a child's fever on his lunar affliction, things could turn. And in this world they turn quickly. You return home, light a candle and sit in silence. The moon is still hidden, but you know it's full tonight. You feel it, in your pulse, your teeth, your dreams. You wonder what stories people would tell about you if you started humming to trees, if you stopped eating, if you carved circles into your doorframe and whispered secrets into wells. Would they blame the moon, or would they simply say she's cracked? You lie down and press your palm to your chest, counting your breaths like steps across a fragile bridge. And for a moment you consider leaving, disappearing into the woods, becoming a myth yourself. Better to be whispered about than stared at. But you don't. You stay. Because as much as this world misunderstands the mind, it still holds space for magic, for rhythm, for strange old men who hum to the sky. And maybe, just maybe, there's still room for you. The first thing you notice is the smell sharp, metallic, faintly sour. Then you see the tool's bone-handled knives, stained cloth, a small bowl of thick red liquid. The barber surgeon's cart has rolled into town again, setting up in front of the inn like it's market day. And for some reason, people are already lining up. This time, it's not just tooth-pulling or bloodletting. He's got a new offering written in scratchy ink on a wooden sign, balancing of the humours for those plagued by madness or unease. You feel your stomach turn, because you know what that means. It means leeches, cupping, purgatives, possibly mustard plasters or enemas made from things that should not go into the body, and all because someone woke up feeling heavy in the chest or started crying during Vespers. You've read about the four humours, blood phlegm, black bile and yellow bile. The whole medieval world is built on their balance. If you're melancholic, too much black bile, they say you're sad, withdrawn, possibly deranged. The cure: bleed you out, induce vomiting, apply hot poultices to draw out the excess. Of course, no one has actually seen these humours, but that doesn't stop anyone from talking about them as if they were wine or soup ingredients. It's all based on ancient Greek medical theory passed down through Galen's writings and still gospel 1,000 years later. Historians still argue whether medieval physicians actually believed in the humours with full conviction, or if it was more of a convenient framework, something to hang treatments on when nothing else made sense. But belief or not, the effects were real. A man in front of you steps up to the cart. He's twitchy, pale, won't meet anyone's eyes. You heard he hasn't spoken since his wife died last harvest. The barber nods solemnly and pulls out a long, thin blade. You can't watch, because what they're about to do is treat grief like an infection, as if the sadness itself is a thing that must be drained, not felt, not processed, just expelled. You step away from the crowd. You've had days like his. Not quite grief, but the numbness after. The aching quiet. You've thought about asking for help before, but you know what help looks like in this town. A leech on your temple, a forced sweat, maybe a boiled concoction of nettle and old beer that just makes you throw up and wonder if your soul came out with it. They mean well, you suppose, but meaning doesn't stop harm. You pass a boy holding his mother's hand, both staring at the sign. The boy's cheeks are red from crying. She whispers to him, "Just a little cut and you'll feel lighter." He nods like he's trying to believe her, and maybe he will feel lighter. Placebo's powerful, ritual even more so. Sometimes the body doesn't need a cure, it needs a story, a reason, a promise that something was done, that the darkness was noticed, addressed, bled. Still the idea of draining your body to fix your mind that never quite sits right with you. You heard once, just once, about a healer from Italy who thought melancholy wasn't always a disease, that it might be the sign of a thoughtful mind, a soul too deep for this world. He was laughed at, of course, called soft, romantic, but the idea stuck with you. Maybe your black bile isn't a curse. Maybe it's just part of the weather of your being. And yet try telling that to a man who's just had 12 ounces of blood drained because he felt a little too tired at matins. Back at the cart, someone screams. The barber's shaking his head. Too much bile, he mutters. It was clogging his thoughts. He'll sleep better now. You wonder what happens when he doesn't. When the dreams still come. When he wakes gasping and his wife looks at him like she doesn't recognize him anymore. They'll say the treatment should have worked. And if it didn't, well, that's the patient's fault, not the method. Later that afternoon you find a leech in your water bucket. Long and black, wriggling like a curse. You flinch but don't kill it. Just scoop it out with a stick and toss it into the grass. It lives. That night the rain returns. You sit by the fire rubbing rosemary oil on your wrists like Mother Celia taught you. It helps a little. At least it smells like something other than fear. You think about the boy from earlier. The one with red cheeks and a brave nod. You hope the cut wasn't too deep. You hope he wasn't made to swallow something that burned. You hope someone holds him after. Because at the heart of all these treatments, Leech's bleeding bile balancing is the same desperate idea: get it out. Whatever it is, whatever's wrong, it must be in you. Hiding, corrupting. And if you could just expel it, you'd be clean again. But what if that thing isn't poison? What if it's just pain? And what if pain needs listening, not draining? You blow out your candle. And in the dark, you whisper to yourself the most radical thing of all. Maybe I'm not broken. The bell tolls? It's a low, mournful sound, usually reserved for funerals or fast days, but this time it means something else entirely. The village is gathering for a public penance. That can mean many things here, but you've heard the whispers someone's confessed to mad thoughts. Thoughts that wander too far from the flock. You pull your cloak tighter and head toward the square. When you arrive, there's a small crowd already. Rain slicks the cobblestones. The air smells like wet wool and old gilt. And standing in the middle arms bound with a rosary is a woman you recognize. Sister Elena, a nun. One of the quiet ones. She tended the convent garden used to hum while she weeded. Her voice was always soft even when reading aloud in the chapel. You never thought she'd be the one on the platform. The priest reads from a scroll, his voice loud and clear. She has confessed to hearing voices that are not of God. She speaks to shadows. She has refused to eat. She claims to feel nothing even in prayer. Your stomach knots. Those aren't crimes, they're symptoms. But this is the Middle Ages and people don't separate soul from self. If something's wrong with your mind, it must be a matter of spirit. And if your spirit strays, the only answer is confession. Penance, maybe even punishment. You watch as she's made to kneel in the mud. This is not rare. In religious life, where silence and obedience are already law, mental illness often gets misread as disobedience, or pride, or sin. A monk who grows withdrawn might be labelled slothful. A nun who weeps daily may be accused of vanity of seeking attention. And visions, they're the slipperiest of all. If they align with doctrine, you're a mystic. If they don't, you're a danger. Historians still argue whether religious institutions offered sanctuary or surveillance for the mentally ill. There are records of monasteries caring deeply for their own giving space prayer, even herbal treatments. But there are just as many records of exorcisms, isolations and shame. You look at Sister Elena, rain dripping down her forehead. She doesn't seem afraid, just distant. One friar steps forward and places ashes on her head. Let the devil be burned from her mind, he says. Then they begin the chanting. You've heard this before in other ceremonies, but now it sounds more like a dirge than a deliverance. You wonder what she actually felt. Was it despair? Numbness? Could she not taste food anymore? Not sleep? Did she try to speak of it only to find that the words made others recoil? You remember a scholar from decades past, Hildegard of Bingen. A nun too, but one who claimed her visions were divine. Bright lights, sounds, colours. She turned them into music and writing, and she was celebrated. The difference: timing, politics, luck. One woman's revelation is another's madness. It's all in how the wind blows. You spot a young novice at the edge of the crowd, her knuckles white on her rosary beads. She's not watching the ritual, she's watching you. And in her eyes you see something raw fear, maybe, or recognition. You wonder if she's felt the same quiet blankness, the same weight behind her ribs. You wonder how long she'll be able to hide it. A cart rolls in behind the chapel. Someone mentions retreat. You know what that means. Elena is being sent away to a more remote convent, perhaps, or to a cell beneath the monastery, out of sight. A holy silence, they'll call it. But it's exile dressed in scripture. Back home you light a candle for her. Not because you believe it'll change anything, but because it feels like doing something. And for a long time, you sit and wonder, in a world where the divine is everywhere, how do you explain an empty soul? You've felt that emptiness. You've seen it in the eyes of others, their slow blinks, their tight smiles, their mechanical prayers. It's not sin, it's not pride, it's not demons. It's depression, grief, disassociation, burnout, but there's no language for that yet. So instead there's only confession. You open your window, let the wind in. It's cold but sharp like truth. You whisper Sister Elena's name once then again, as if saying it might tether her to this world. The next morning you hear that she's been taken away in silence. No blessing, no farewell, and the convent garden is suddenly very quiet. There's something in the bread. That's the rumour anyway. It started in the next village over a strange illness sweeping through with no warning. People convulsing, shouting things in languages they didn't speak, seeing visions. One woman climbed the bell tower and claimed she could see angels in the wheat fields. It took only a day for the panic to reach your town. They're cursed, someone mutters in the tavern. It's the devil in the flour. But you've heard something else, from a passing trader, something about ergot. A fungus. Tiny dark thread-like things that grow on damp rye. When baked into bread, it can poison the mind, cause spasms, hallucinations, a burning sensation in the limbs. It's rare but not unknown. Some scholars today believe ergotism may have been behind outbreaks of mass hysteria, even some witch trials. Historians still argue whether the dancing plague's strange possessions and entire outbreaks of madness were caused by ergot or by collective stress and fear. Likely both. But here now, the idea that your bread could undo your mind, that's something nobody's ready for. You stare at your own crust gone hard on the table. You don't feel any different. Yet. But you swear your fingertips are tingling. A merchant tries to reassure everyone he's brought fresh wheat free of curse, he says. But no one wants to bake. They're scared. As if madness can be consumed like a meal hidden in the cracks of daily life. And that's the terrifying part it can be. You've seen it happen. A boy once sang a wedding song for 3 days straight, unable to stop. A woman woke up unable to remember her children's names. A man believed his left hand was trying to kill him and bit it until the bone showed. All three had eaten from the same batch. Or so they say. But of course none of this proves anything. That's the danger with medieval explanations, they always veer into guesswork and superstition. Science is a baby here, just learning to crawl. So when the unexplainable happens, people don't ask, what's in the bread? They ask, who did this? And now they're looking for someone to blame. It doesn't take long. A young woman named Luta. She's quiet, lives alone, has a twisted foot and reads too much. Some say she dries herbs in her chimney and stares at the moon too often. Not long ago she sold bread on market day. The connection is flimsy, but it's enough. You find her outside her home weeping as villagers rip open her baskets and throw her loaves into the fire. I didn't know, she sobs. I didn't know anything was wrong. And maybe she didn't. Or maybe she did and didn't understand. It doesn't matter. In this world, madness spreads like smoke and people always look for a spark to stamp out. You step back into the shadows helpless. If you speak up, you could be next. They don't hurt her. Not yet. But she's shunned now. Marked. No one will buy from her again. Her name will be a warning whispered to children who ask too many questions. And still the strange symptoms keep showing up. Not in everyone, but enough. The priest declares a fast. Cleanse your bodies. Cleanse your minds, he says. And you wonder if not eating might be safer than risking another bite of bread. You go home and boil carrots. Plain, safe, empty. That night your dreams are strange. The air feels thicker. Your fingers twitch as you sleep. You wake with a taste of smoke in your mouth and no fire in sight. You check your remaining bread just in case. It's fine, probably, but what if it's not? What if madness isn't just a feeling, but a thing that sinks in through what you touch, eat, breathe? What if it's already inside you? You remember what Mother Celia said once, not all poisons are from outside, but not all are born inside either. A riddle or a warning. You spend the next day watching people, noticing who flinches, who hums without realizing, who mutters into their cups. You see signs everywhere. And the worst part, you don't know if they're real. That's what fear does. It blurs the line between danger and imagination, between caution and paranoia. The priest orders all remaining bread destroyed. A community bonfire is lit in the square. You bring yours pretending you hadn't already buried it behind your house the night before, just in case. The flames crackle, smoke twists upward, children cheer as if it's a festival. And you stand there silent thinking of Luta, of ergot, of all the invisible things that might be working their way through your blood right now. Maybe it was the bread, maybe it's just grief. Maybe it's something older, something that's always been here woven into the roots of the rye and the bones of the town. You close your eyes, and for a second you swear you hear music, a wedding song. No one else is singing. You haven't left your house in 3 days. The storm came on hard, howling winds, the kind that slap shutters open and shake the bones of your cottage. But that's not why you stayed in. It's the eyes. Lately when you step outside, it feels like everyone's watching. Not in the friendly, oh, there she goes again way. In the is she next kind of way. Ever since the bread burning, people have grown skittish. They're scanning each other for signs, and your silence isn't helping. You're afraid to speak too much, laugh too loudly, cry where someone might hear. One wrong movement and suddenly you're Luta 2.0. No one's saying it, but it's there. This quiet suspicion humming under every interaction. So you stay indoors, but staying in doesn't help as much as you thought. Because when you're alone, your thoughts don't go quiet. They amplify. They start to loop, echo, fragment. And you begin to wonder how much of your fear is real, and how much is something breaking loose inside you. On the third night you hear something. It's faint at first, a whisper, a footstep, maybe just the wind. You sit up in bed, straining your ears. There it is again, and then silence. You light a candle. Every shadow looks suspicious. Your breath quickens. This is what dread feels like when it has nowhere to land, just flutters in your chest like a trapped bat. You start thinking of spirits. Because that's the medieval mind for you. When internal things get too loud, the explanation turns external. You're not anxious. You're haunted. You're not depressed. You're possessed. There's something on you, in you, something not you. You think back to stories of familiars little demons said to whisper into ears at night, urging madness or melancholy. Cats, birds, even beetles. People claimed they lived in walls, in beds in skulls. There's a folk tale you remember about a woman who couldn't sleep for a year. They found a spider's nest under her pillow and said the creature had been laying eggs in her dreams. That's what caused the ill thoughts, they said. You'd laugh, but not tonight. Not when your dreams have been weirdly specific lately. The church had plenty to say about these things, of course. You've sat through the sermons. Sin opens the door to spirits, they said. Pride invites them. Lust feeds them. And women. Well, you were basically born with the door already open. Historians still argue whether most people truly believed in possession, or whether it was a way to explain away the unexplainable. But in a world without psychiatry or neuroscience, possession was a tidy answer. And tidy answers are comforting. You look at your hands, they're shaking. Not much, just enough to notice. You've been here before on the edge of a spiral. But this time you know what to do. You find the rosemary oil. You whisper one of Mother Celia's grounding rhymes. Mind is weather not the sky, let the winds of fear blow by. It helps, a little. Still, you need to do something. So you make a charm, not because you think it's magic, but because making it calms you. You take a scrap of linen, tuck in some lavender, a dried acorn, and a hair from your comb. Tie it 3 times with red thread. Place it under your bed. You sleep, and you dream of fireflies in jars. None of them escape, but they blink slowly, calmly. When you wake, the storm has passed. The air smells like earth and new beginnings. You step outside. No one stares today. At the well, you pass a woman rubbing her wrists with salt. A quiet ritual for protection. At the bakery finally reopened, you overhear someone muttering a prayer against dark whispers. These things aren't official, not church-sanctioned, but they persist. Because deep down, everyone knows the mind is a fragile thing. And whether you call it imbalance, melancholy, or spirits, the truth remains you feel something. And you're desperate to feel safe. You've felt watched, cursed, touched by invisible things. But today you feel present. You walk to the edge of the woods near Mother Celia's path. A bundle of herbs hangs from her door. Not for sale, just a message. Come when ready. And for the first time in days you think you might. Because whatever is on you isn't a demon. It's just being human. A hard, unpredictable, often quiet kind of suffering. And you're not alone. Not haunted, not cursed. Just healing. Slowly. The frost comes early this year. You wake to a world dusted in white rooftops, glimmering like sugar loaves, every breath a soft puff of steam. Beautiful, yes, but also dangerous. Cold has a way of drawing out more than just the ache in your joints. It sharpens everything. Grief. Loneliness. That low humming dread you've tried to shake. By noon the village is quiet. Most folks stay inside once winter sets in, and those who don't, well, you start to worry about them. You pass one man on the road, trudging through snow barefoot, mumbling something about walking to the sun. His tunic is soaked, his face slack. You call to him, but he doesn't respond. A neighbour leads him back inside, gently wraps him in wool. No one says the word, but everyone's thinking it. Fever mind, the cold, it seems, makes people crack. That's not just superstition. There's a growing belief among scholars, even some church figures, that long winters worsen the soul. They don't call it seasonal affective disorder, obviously, but the idea is there. Winter melancholia, one monk called it. A sadness that grows like ice upon the soul. Historians still argue whether those early observations count as psychology, or just poetic weather commentary. But either way, they knew something about the season chips away at the spirit. And no one feels it harder than the anchorites. You've heard of them, holy people who choose to live locked away, often in tiny cells attached to churches, sometimes permanently. The idea is to shut out the world to get closer to God. But not all anchorites choose. Some are encouraged to enter seclusion because of odd behaviour, visions, outbursts, or simply because they didn't fit. Once enclosed, their needs are cared for, food passed through a slot, prayers requested from the outside, but their isolation is absolute. You remember hearing about one Lady Meriel from a town east of here. She was noble, clever, and once believed to be blessed. Then one winter she stopped speaking, stared for hours at snowflakes, refused to eat, said the Virgin was sleeping in her mouth and wouldn't wake. Instead of punishment, they offered her a cell. It was meant as kindness. You wonder if she still believes it was. You've thought about that sometimes. What it would be like to step away from everything. No noise, no gossip, just stone walls and silence. Safe from judgment, but also entirely alone with your thoughts. It sounds peaceful and terrifying, because you know what your mind can do when it has nothing to bounce off of. No distractions, no other voices, just your own looping like a chant. That night the cold creeps into your bones. You heat stones by the fire and tuck them under your blanket like Mother Celia taught you. Outside, snow begins to fall again, whisper soft. You start thinking about madness by isolation. It's not a phrase you've heard anyone say aloud, but it lives here in the background of every quiet winter. People who once laughed becoming slow, hollow versions of themselves. Women whispering to walls. Men who sleep all day and forget the names of their own cows. But no one talks about it until it's loud, and by then it's too late. In some parts of Europe, there are tales of ice spirits who slip into the ears of the lonely and whisper despair. It's said they ride frost down from the mountains. You know it's just folklore, but tonight, curled up by the fire, you imagine them. Tiny white-eyed things, clinging to eyelashes, slipping behind thoughts. You pull the blanket tighter. The next morning you make yourself go outside, not for anything urgent, just to prove you can. You walk to the woods. The snow hushes your footsteps. So quiet you can hear your breath in your ears. You find the stump where you and Celia once picked thyme. It's covered now, a smooth dome of white. You brush some of it away and sit. Let the cold sting your palms. It hurts, but it grounds you, anchors you to now. You stay like that until your toes go numb. When you return, you pass the house of the barefoot man. Someone's built a fire inside, smoke curls from the chimney. He's still here, still alive. And somehow that helps, because the cold doesn't care who you are. It gets into all of us. But so does warmth. And right now, even this little village, suspicious, fragile, half-mad as it may be, is keeping the fires going. You think about writing something. A prayer, maybe. Or a list of things that still feel real. Fire, bread, wool, Celia's laugh. The way the moon looked on the night you almost disappeared into your own thoughts. You light a candle. Not for anyone else, just for yourself. A soft, flickering rebellion against the frost. It's been days since anyone spoke above a whisper. You're not sure who started it. Maybe it was after the widow Elsky collapsed in the chapel mid-prayer, murmuring something about a stairway made of teeth. Or maybe it was when the shepherd boy walked into the woods and didn't come back. Either way, people are afraid again. But this time the fear has turned inward. You notice it in how they move hunched shoulders, fast glances, footsteps muffled even in snow. Like everyone's trying not to disturb something. As if madness itself is a sleeping beast under the floorboards. And you've started walking a lot. It helps. There's something rhythmic about your steps that keeps the panic just far enough away. You follow the path out past the pastures, through the trees, until the village is just a blur behind frost-glazed branches. Sometimes, if you walk far enough, you almost forget you live in a world that misunderstands your mind. Almost. Today you hear something new. Laughter. Not cruel, not loud, just soft, drifting through the trees like smoke. You follow it carefully until you reach a clearing. There under a yew tree is a girl, barefoot, wearing a crown of icicles and twigs. She's drawing in the snow with a stick, humming. You don't recognize her. She doesn't look up even as you approach. Just keeps humming and drawing, humming and drawing. "Are you all right?" you ask. She blinks once, then nods. "It's quieter out here," she says. You believe her. You sit beside her without asking. Let her finish her spiral patterns in peace. When she's done, she finally turns. "They think I'm broken," she says simply, "but I think they're too loud." You nod and she smiles. Her name is Thea. She's from a village that no longer exists, burned in a bad harvest 3 years ago. She wandered here, found by a tanner's wife, and has lived on the edge of the forest ever since. Some call her feral, others call her blessed. No one really knows what to do with people like her. You talk for a while about the snow, about clouds shaped like animals, about dreams. She has many of those. Some strange, some lovely. She doesn't seem afraid of them. "I think I was meant to be a bird," she says suddenly, "but they gave me the wrong bones." You laugh, not because it's silly, but because it feels true in a way. Thea tells you about her visions, not the scary kind, the quiet ones, of glowing paths and kind eyes in the dark. She says she used to be terrified of them. Now she just listens. They're not voices she clarifies, they're echoes from somewhere better. You wonder, what if she's not unwell? What if she's simply different? In the Middle Ages, there's little space between divine inspiration and disorder. A woman who has visions can be canonized or condemned, and sometimes both. It depends on who's listening. Historians still argue whether medieval mystics like Marjorie Kempe were prophets, or suffering from what we'd now call psychosis. Marjorie wept, constantly claimed to hear God, and wrote about her conversations with Jesus. Some called her holy, others called her mad, and still her story survived. You watch Thea press her palm into the snow as if checking for a pulse beneath it. There's no sickness in the cold, she whispers, only silence. Later, she walks you back toward the village, not all the way, just to where the trees thin. Before you part, she gives you a stone. It's smooth oval and completely ordinary, but you hold it like a treasure. Back in the village, someone sees you with it and frowns. Was that from her? You nod. They sigh. Don't let her talk too much, she'll put clouds in your head. You don't answer. You just slide the stone into your pocket. That night you dream of wings. Not flying exactly, more like floating. You wake with your hands curled like claws, your feet pressed against the bed as if you'd been mid-takeoff. You think of Thea and the way she said the wrong bones. And for the first time in a long time, you feel something soft settle behind your ribs. Not fear, not grief. Just understanding. Not everyone who sees differently is lost. Some are just looking at a sky no one else can see. You return to Thea's clearing the next day. This time, she's not alone. A boy sits beside her, young, maybe 10, with dirt-streaked cheeks and a stick shaped like a sword. He's drawing next to her in the snow, copying her spirals but adding dragons to the edges. You pause at the tree line, not wanting to intrude. But Thea sees you and waves you in as if this clearing were hers to share, and you're one of the few she's deemed safe. The boy glances up wary, then returns to his drawing. He doesn't talk much, Thea says softly. His name's Cor. You sit with them, and for a while no one says anything. Just the scratching of sticks in snow and the low rush of wind through bare branches. Then Thea leans toward you and whispers, "They say he's simple, but I think he's just dreaming with his eyes open." You look at Cor, his tongue pressed into his bottom lip as he draws a serpent's wing. He hums a little tuneless thing, like he's halfway between this world and something stranger. Something more magical. You nod. He dreams well. Thea beams. Back in the village, people wouldn't call it dreaming. They'd say touched or slow or not right. And the worst, no use. Because in this world, usefulness means working, speaking clearly, obeying instructions. Anything else is excess, inconvenient, pitied at best, punished at worst. You once heard a story of a boy like Cor from a town across the river. He couldn't form sentences, but built entire cathedrals out of twigs. The villagers said he was moon-muddled, and when the crop failed, they blamed him. They didn't hurt him, but they made him sleep in the barn. He stopped building after that. In medieval life, neurodivergence wasn't a recognized idea. People who processed the world differently were often lumped in with the mad, the cursed, or the foolish. At best, they were considered harmless oddities. At worst, they were burdens to be hidden, mocked, or scapegoated. Historians still argue whether certain medieval fools were tolerated out of kindness or superstition. Some were kept in courts for entertainment jesters, clowns, natural fools. Others were allowed to wander fed scraps and patted on the head like pets. The line between protection and humiliation was always razor thin. But here in this clearing, Thea doesn't treat Cor like a fool. She treats him like a collaborator. Later, she shows you a little shrine they've built together, 3 flat stones stacked like a tower, a feather tucked in between, and a ring of moss at the base. It's for the wind, she says. You ask what the wind needs a shrine for. To feel welcome, she replies. You don't laugh, because it doesn't feel silly, it feels right. As the sun begins to lower, you walk back toward the village with a strange ache in your chest. Not pain, not joy, something in between. The kind of ache that comes from watching something fragile still survive. That evening you pass the churchyard and hear 2 women whispering. She's still out there talking to that simple boy. It's not natural, the things they say. She's putting ideas in his head. You don't interrupt, you just keep walking. But your fists are clenched in your pockets. Because you know what happens next, don't you? First the whispers, then the fear, then the need to correct. And here's the thing, correction doesn't always look violent. Sometimes it looks like well-meaning men deciding Cor should be apprenticed to someone who doesn't want him. Or a priest insisting Thea be guided back to the proper path. Sometimes it looks like love, and still breaks things. You visit them again the next day just to be sure they're safe. Cor is building a tiny fortress from twigs. Thea is threading icicles onto a bit of twine. She tells you they're making jewellery for a frost queen. She only visits children, she adds, because grown-ups don't believe in her anymore. You smile. Then I suppose I'll never meet her. Thea cocks her head. Maybe, but you're learning to see sideways. You don't know what that means, but it makes you want to cry. That night in your cottage, you pull out the smooth stone Thea gave you. Set it beside your bed. You place one of your own beside it, just a pebble from the path, but now it's a match set. A tiny shrine, maybe. For silence. For safety. For sideways seeing. You lie down, and for the first time in weeks, your dreams are calm. No fire, no chanting, no whispers in the dark. Just wine moving through trees, and a little boy's hum floating through the snow like a lullaby. There's a smell in the air, bitter, earthy, sharp as vinegar. You recognise it immediately, valerian root. Which means only one thing. Mother Celia is brewing again. You find her near the hearth, robes dusted in ash, her fingers stained a greenish yellow from herb paste. A kettle simmers beside her, giving off that unmistakable scent, part medicine, part punishment. Even the cat's keeping its distance. She glances up. You look like a woman carrying stones in her chest. You raise an eyebrow, and you look like a woman making soup for ghosts. She chuckles. Close. For someone's bad sleep and worse thoughts. Sit. You do. Celia has long been the village's quiet answer to problems no one else dares name. She's not officially a healer, and certainly not church-sanctioned. But when someone hears voices, weeps for no reason, or walks too far from their own mind, they come here. And she listens. No bleeding, no demons, just tea and time. Today she's making a batch for Hannes, the blacksmith's brother. You've heard he's been refusing to leave his bed. Not sick, just vacant. They call it indolence, she says, as if stillness were a choice. She gestures to her shelves lined with jars, skullcap, ashwagandha, poppy seed, even a vial of powdered amber. Not all of it legal, none of it listed in any monastery's ledger, but all of it trusted by those who've run out of other ounces. You help her grind valerian. The smell clings to your nails. It's grounding in a strange way, like prepping for a ritual you know works even if no priest has blessed it. As you work, she tells you stories of women who stopped eating because they feared being seen, of men who wandered the woods convinced their shadows were chasing them, of a boy who forgot his own name and took to answering only to the wind. Did you cure them, you ask? She smiles faintly. No one cures weather, but I helped them live through the storm. Historians still argue whether medieval folk healers like Celia were true mental health providers, or just patchwork figures filling the void. But there's no doubt they were vital, especially to the ones no one else understood. You sip a bit of the finished brew. It tastes like warm dirt, but your shoulders loosen all the same. Why don't you teach others to do this, you ask? She shrugs. Because the church says illness is a test. If you make it easier, they think you're cheating. You think of the leeches, the purges, the chants meant to drown out sorrow, and then you think of this, of simple warmth in a cracked mug. It doesn't fix everything, but it feels like care. That night you deliver the tea to Hannes. His brother accepts it with a nod, eyes red. No one speaks of what's wrong. They just murmur thanks and close the door. Back in your cottage, you light a candle and write down everything you remember about Celia's remedies. Not because you think she'll disappear, but because you know how easily voices like hers are lost in the wind. You fall asleep with the smell of valerian still in your skin. Your dreams are slow and tangled like roots reaching towards something soft. When you wake, the cat has curled beside you, and for once your breath doesn't catch in your throat. It comes easy, full, like you've made peace with a part of yourself that used to sit in the corner silent and scared. You think maybe you'll visit Hannes tomorrow, not to ask if he's better, just to sit. Because sometimes the cure is presence, and sometimes presence is all you can give, and that is enough. The church bells ring before dawn, not the slow, single-tone toll of death, but the frantic clattering kind that means only one thing: judgment is coming. You throw on your cloak and step into the bitter air. A small crowd is already forming in front of the chapel. They stand hunched and silent faces like stone. No one speaks your name. No one looks you in the eye. But you know why you're here. You heard the rumours last night. A girl named Mirella, barely 13, was found in the woods at sunrise muttering to herself barefoot, shaking her hands scratched from branches. The stars were speaking, she'd whispered over and over, and no one would listen. She was taken to the priest before she even had time to wash the blood from her fingers. Now she sits on the chapel steps, shivering in a borrowed wool blanket, hair matted to her scalp. Her mother stands nearby, face hollow with confusion and shame. Demonic temptation, the priest declares. She's dreaming while awake, her uncle mutters. Did she eat something cursed, asks the baker's wife. She's always been strange, someone adds, always humming to herself. The blame shifts like snowdrift. You inch forward, but a monk steps in your way. She needs cleansing, he tells the crowd. Her spirit is disordered. He raises a vial holy water infused with ash, the kind they use during particularly dramatic exorcisms. Your stomach turns. This isn't care, it's theatre, and you've seen it before. You once watched a man's soul be exorcised in front of a jeering crowd. All it did was traumatize him further and leave him with a permanent tremor in his left hand. He was never quite the same after, and still the people applauded. Historians still argue whether exorcisms were a sincere spiritual act or a convenient tool for controlling those who deviated from the norm. But whatever their intent, the effect was often the same: fear, shame, and deep-lasting harm. You take a step toward Morella. You don't know what you'll do. Maybe just sit beside her. Maybe take her hand. But again, the monk blocks you. She's not for your kind of healing, he says quietly with a sneer. This is not for herbal teas or silly girl stones. This is God's work. You want to shout that God doesn't need a show. You want to ask if God needs her to shiver barefoot in the snow surrounded by people too afraid of mystery to ask real questions. But you don't, because today they are too loud, too certain. And you know what happens to the ones who speak against the noise. You lock eyes with Morella instead. Just for a second. And she smiles. It's small, frail, but real. She knows you see her. That afternoon you slip a little parcel under her family's door, lavender, lemon balm. A note that reads, "You're not broken." The stars don't always speak softly. You don't sign your name. But you hope she'll know. In your cottage you light 2 candles. One for her, one for anyone who's ever been called possessed, when all they really needed was peace. The village goes on. The priest declares Morella cleansed after 3 days of prayer fasting and whispered rituals. She returns home pale and distant eyes dimmed, but not gone. You see her once more weeks later in the woods near Thea's clearing. She's not humming, but she's listening to winter birds, to something deeper. You walk beside her for a while, say nothing, and when you part, she presses a pine cone into your hand. "Thank you," she says. You don't ask for what, because you already know. You wake in the middle of the night to silence so thick it feels like wool stuffed in your ears. No wind, no owl call, even the cat isn't snoring. Then you realize it's not just quiet. It's wrong. A kind of quiet that presses against your skin like the air is holding its breath. You sit up, and you feel it. A weight. Not physical, not even emotional. Just a presence. Like something ancient has stepped into the room and is waiting for you to notice. You try to name it grief, fear, memory, but none of those quite fit. It's heavier than grief, subtler than fear, older than memory. This is sorrow. And not just yours. You throw on your cloak and step into the night. Something draws you forward out of the house, past the square along the dirt path that leads to the oldest part of the village. The graveyard. And there you find her. An old woman wrapped in layers of wool sitting beside a weathered headstone. She hums a tune you don't recognize, eyes closed. In her lap is a pouch filled with small wooden carvings. Animal stars a pair of hands cupped like a bowl. You don't speak, not yet. But when she finally opens her eyes, she says, "I knew someone would come." Grief likes company. You sit. And she tells you her name is Hilda. She lost 3 children to the sweating sickness and her husband to a fire that took half the bakery. That was years ago, but the pain never left. It only changed shape. They called me mad for how I mourned, she says. I sang to ashes. I talked to shadows. I forgot how to boil water. They nearly sent me to the convent. You listen, because sometimes that's the only thing left to do. I wasn't mad, she adds. I was broken. But broken isn't wicked. Broken just hurts. You remember stories of the melancholic widow, a stock figure in medieval tales often portrayed as a warning. A woman too sad for too long. A woman who couldn't move on. A woman who made others uncomfortable simply by existing in her pain. Historians still argue whether these portrayals reflected real medical diagnoses or just a societal impatience with grief. But either way, you see it in Hilda's eyes she wasn't allowed to feel, so she carried it in silence. And silence, as you've learned, can turn poisonous. I carved these, she says, gesturing to the little wooden figures, to give my sadness a shape. If you can see it, you can sit beside it. That's easier than swallowing it whole. You take one from the pouch, a bird with a cracked wing. You run your thumb over it, smooth but jagged near the edge. You don't say anything, but Hilda nods like you did. The stars blink above you. Hilda stays in the graveyard and you walk back home holding the bird like a secret. That morning you place it on your shelf. Beside it you write on a scrap of paper, "Broken isn't wicked." And beneath that, "Grief does not expire." Later when you tell Celia about Hilda, she nods solemnly. There are many like her, she says. women who lost everything and had to pretend they hadn't, or be labelled mad. You ask, why is grief so scary to them? She shrugs, because it reminds them they could feel that much too. You think back to Morella, to Thea, to Hannes, and now to Hilda. Each of them carrying something unseen, each of them terrifying to others simply because they felt too much too deeply, or in ways too strange. The Middle Ages don't offer much for sorrow. You have prayers, of course, and long fasts. You can weep at an altar or walk to a pilgrimage site, but beyond that you're expected to heal quietly and visibly obediently. Anything else risks being called madness. You light a candle that night for Hilda's children, then one for everyone who's been asked to hurry their heart through something slow, then one for yourself, because your own sorrow, though less sharp, is still yours. It deserves its shape too. You take a bit of wood and begin to carve. It won't be perfect, but neither are you, and maybe that's the point. The town square smells like boiling vinegar and stale meat, which can only mean one thing: the travelling physician has returned. You spot him setting up beneath the old fig tree flanked by 2 wooden crates, and a boy assistant who looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. The man wears a faded red robe, a pointed hat, and a mask that might have once been theatrical, now just cracked plaster and glue. He announces himself as Master Elian, healer of flesh and spirit. You squint. Last time he came through, he tried to sell dried frogs as sleep cures and claimed to have trapped a demon in a jar. People laughed, but still bought his elixirs. Desperation makes the absurd feel oddly reasonable. Today his pitch is louder, more urgent. I have the cure, he bellows, for melancholy, madness, despair. The devil's fog. I can clear it from your mind. A small crowd gathers. He gestures to his crate, lifting a bottle filled with murky liquid. One sip and your spirits will rise like spring wheat. He even brought props this time, diagrams of the 4 humours, a painting of a brain with a leech perched on top, and your favourite, a puppet labelled Lady Melancholia, complete with black veil and sad eyes. People murmur. Someone buys a bottle. And another. You fold your arms watching. Master Elian isn't the only one profiting off mental suffering. Quack doctors and so-called wise men wander the countryside hawking everything from goat bile tonics to powdered coral. Their solutions are rarely helpful and occasionally lethal. But the need is real. There's almost no one officially equipped to deal with sadness that doesn't come from injury or sin. Medicine is still ruled by the theory of humours: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Too much of one, especially black bile, is said to cause melancholia. The solution: purging, leeches, fasting, maybe a cold compress soaked in vinegar. Historians still argue whether this humoral model helped or hindered our understanding of mental illness. It endured for centuries, yet it often confused the symptoms for the cause, treating sadness like a stomachache and ignoring what the soul was screaming. Master Elian now introduces a cure-all pill. It's just waxed honey mixed with thyme and mint. You want to laugh, until you see the face of the man who buys it. He's not a fool, just exhausted. The kind of exhausted that comes from weeks of waking up each day and wishing you hadn't. He clutches the bottle like it's the first hope he's held in months. You step away, because suddenly this isn't funny. This is familiar. That ache, that longing for something, anything to explain what's happening in your mind. You've felt it. The hunger for clarity, the craving for someone to say this is what you have, and here's how we fix it. And maybe that's what Elian offers. Not real healing, but structure, a narrative. You stop by his booth on the way back. He grins. Looking for relief, madam? Looking, you reply, for ingredients. He raises a brow. Ah, a sister of the herbs. You lift a jar from his table. You labelled this as powdered poppy. It's actually ground chalk. He doesn't blink. Placebo works wonders, he says with a wink. You place the jar down gently, and lies break people. He shrugs. So does truth, sometimes. He's not wrong. But he's not right either. You go home and write a list. Things that have helped. Warm stone under the blanket, Thea's spirals, Hilda's bird, valerian root, just a pinch, being heard. You look at the list and realise something. It's not a cure. It's coping. And maybe in this age of imbalance and suspicion and masks masquerading as medicine, that's the best most people can hope for. You place the list in a drawer. Tomorrow you'll check on the man who bought the wax pill. Not to scold him, to sit with him. Because you understand that need. And you're learning that sometimes the gentlest thing you can offer someone lost in their own mind is to sit down beside them and not ask them to explain. Just be there. That night you dream of wooden puppets and sad-eyed ladies. But in your dream she takes off the veil, and underneath she's smiling. It's festival day in the village. That once-a-season ritual where people pretend everything is fine by decorating carts, roasting meat, and drinking until their thoughts feel far away. Children wear garlands of dried corn husks. Someone sings terribly near the fountain. You count at least 3 goats wearing bells. You try to feel festive, but your mind is doing that thing again, looping questions like string around your ribs, tighter each time. Are you better? Are you safe? Are you fooling everyone? You grab a hunk of bread and wander past the dancers seeking quiet. And then you see her, an old woman seated at a rickety stall near the far edge of the square. Not part of the official market. No sign. Just her and a low table covered in bones. Well, not real bones. Carvings of hands, ears, hearts. Symbols painted in ash and berry juice. Each one slightly off kilter like a dream half remembered. You pause. She gestures you closer. Troubled sleep, she asks, before you say a word. You nod slowly. Too many thoughts that have nowhere to sit, she murmurs. Try this. She hands you a carved ear. It's smooth the size of a walnut. It listens for you while you rest, she says. Takes the worry so you don't have to. You smile uncertain. Does it work? Only if you want it to, she says, then adds, but so does worrying. You buy it. Because, why not? As you walk away, she calls out, the mind doesn't always want healing. Sometimes it wants permission. You keep turning that over. The mind doesn't always want healing. Sometimes it just wants permission to feel, to falter, to be as it is. You wander the festival aimlessly, watching how others carry their own chaos. The baker's apprentice chews his fingernails to the quick between selling loaves. The town scribe has ink smudged across his entire sleeve sign of a restless night's rewriting. Even the priest seems unsteady, blinking too often, clutching a chalice like it might fly away. Historians still argue whether these festivals served as social pressure valves or just distractions, but today it feels like both. You pass Thea. She's making snow angels in the dirt, laughing as Cor throws dry leaves over her. People glance but say nothing. Some smile. One woman mutters, "At least she's not screaming today." You walk up. Do you want to make one? Thea asks, pointing to the leaf pile. You hesitate, then shrug. Why not? You lie down. Let the earth press against you. The leaves are dry, scratchy, but strangely comforting, like you're being buried in laughter. Cor adds a pine cone to your stomach. For luck, he whispers. When you sit up, there's mud in your hair and peace in your chest. You've forgotten the wait for just a few minutes. Later at the evening fire, someone brings out a drum. The rhythm is wild, lopsided free. A few people begin to dance awkwardly at first, then with abandon. Celia joins in skirts swirling silver hair lit by flame. You think this is madness too, but the good kind. Not the spiralling kind that hollows your ribs and blurs your vision, but the kind that lets your body move without asking permission from your mind. The kind that says, I am here. I am strange. I am still allowed to be joyful. You join them. You laugh. You stumble. You shout nonsense into the fire. You forget the carved ear in your pocket until you reach home. You place it beside your bed. And that night you dream of drums echoing through trees of bone charms singing lullabies of wild dances that never need to end. You don't know if you're healed, but you've given yourself permission. And somehow that feels like the most powerful magic of all. You wake to fog so thick you can't see past your doorstep. The world feels soft, uncertain, like everything's holding its breath. Even the chickens are quiet, their usual morning squabbles muffled. The sun is somewhere behind the clouds, but it doesn't seem to care about showing itself today. You pull on your boots and step into the haze. Fog like this makes the village feel unfamiliar. Familiar shapes blur at the edges, and people speak more softly as if afraid to disturb whatever's hiding in the whiteness. You make your way to the chapel, not for mass, just for the stillness. But the doors are closed. A note is pinned to the handle, closed for cleansing. That can't be good. You stop by Celia's. She's in the garden fog, curling around her ankles like a sleepy cat. She's picking dead nettles and whispering to herself. Everything's turned thick, she says, squinting toward the path. The veil's heavier than usual today. You nod, not entirely sure what she means, but feeling it anyway. She hands you a sprig of rue. For protection, she says. You slip it behind your ear. It smells like pepper and bitterness and safety. Fog like this, she continues, pulls things up from the root. Thoughts you've buried. Fears you folded into corners. It's not evil, just revealing. You remember last night's dream. You were a child again, running down a hallway that never ended, chased by your own voice, repeating words you didn't understand. You'd woken sweating, heart pounding, as if the walls had followed you into the waking world. You'd shaken it off. But now in this fog it lingers. Some think fog is a punishment, Celia says. Others think it's a test. You ask, what do you think? She shrugs. I think it's a mirror. She tells you stories of villagers who'd gone wandering in fog like this, only to return changed. Not physically, but with something shifted behind the eyes. Some came back quiet, others wild-eyed, others clear for the first time in years. Fog walks with your mind, she says. It reflects, it asks. Historians still argue whether such beliefs about weather tied to madness were metaphors or taken literally. But you've seen enough strange things in your time to believe that the environment does speak. Sometimes in whispers, sometimes in storms. You leave Celia's with a pouch of dried fennel and instructions to boil it if the dreams return. You decide to walk into the woods. Not far, just enough to see if anything inside you answers. The trees are ghost-like in the fog, their trunks fading after a few feet. You move slowly each step, careful as if the world might shift beneath you. And then the voice, not loud, not threatening, just familiar. You freeze. It says your name not as a call but like a question. You spin, heart pounding, but there's no one, just the fog and the hush. You take a breath. You say your own name out loud. And in that moment you remember who you are. Not the version the village sees, not the one your worry paints late at night, but the core. The one that's survived so many quiet battles. You say it again, louder. And the fog doesn't vanish, but it recedes just a little. You walk back home differently, lighter. Not because you're cured or safe or free from your mind's strange corners, but because you faced something in the fog and didn't turn away. That night you write it down. Fog doesn't blind, it reveals. Today I did not flinch. Today I remembered I have always been here. You sleep soundly. When you wake, the fog is gone. The sun is small but steady. The rue is still behind your ear, and your reflection in the basin looks a little more like someone who made peace with herself. The village wakes to drums again, but not the festival kind. These are slow, solemn, the kind that make your ribs rattle and your stomach go cold. You peek through your shutter and see a figure being led through the square. It's Tomlin. He's bound at the wrist, his tunic torn, dried blood under his nose. His hair is matted, his eyes wild. But it's not fear you see there, it's fury. Someone whispers, he tried to curse the scribe. Another mutters he's been writing on his walls in his own blood. And someone else says, like that settles everything. You pull on your cloak and hurry out. The square is already thick with people. Tomlin is being led by 2 guards toward the outskirts, where the old cow shed still stands. No one uses it for livestock anymore, just storage and isolation. Until he's calm, someone says, "But you've heard that before. Calm can mean anything." Celia appears beside you. "They won't listen to reason," she mutters. "They never do once a man's rage is louder than their prayers." Tomlin wasn't always like this. A few months ago he was quiet, kind, clever with tools. He fixed your roof with one hand and a mouthful of jokes. Then his wife died suddenly childbirth and he cracked. Not all at once, in pieces, like something melting from the inside. At first it was weeping in the middle of the road, then muttering at the tavern walls, then silence, then this. You catch his eye as they pass. He looks straight at you and says nothing, but something inside you twists because it's recognition. Not of you, of what you carry, of what he's now drowning in. And you wonder how long until someone looks at you that way. They lock him in the shed with a priest and a basin of water. No one calls it punishment, but it is. You try to visit. You bring bread, balm, a blanket. They turn you away. He needs to be purified, the priest says, not pampered. That night the drumming stops, but your thoughts don't. You pace. You press your palms to your ears. You think about blood-written walls, about how pain left too long becomes louder than reason, about how grief can mutate into something sharp. The next day you sneak to the shed before dawn. Celia's with you. She has keys. Inside it smells of sweat and damp straw. Tomlin sits slumped in a corner, blinking like he's underwater. You kneel beside him, offer the bread. He doesn't speak, but he eats. Celia applies balm to his wrists. He flinches, then relaxes. He's not possessed, she says. He's broken, and no one taught him how to grieve. Historians still argue whether these medieval confinement practices were about care or control, likely both. But too often they were simply fear in disguise, fear of unpredictability of emotion, of minds that didn't behave. You reach into your cloak and pull out a small carving one of Hilda's birds. You place it beside Tomlin. His fingers twitch, then settle. That's all. You leave quietly. That night you carve another figure, this one aflame, small, crude, but warm. You add it to your shelf. And for the first time in days you sleep without dreaming of blood on walls. Because the mind, like fire, is not evil when it burns. It just needs tending. You get word the next morning Tomlin has been released. They say he's calmer now, that the prayers did something, that the priest is satisfied. But when you see Tomlin sitting alone near the smithy, you know the truth. He isn't healed, he's just quiet. His clothes are clean, but his eyes are still far away. He watches the sky like he's waiting for it to fall. No one speaks to him. People cross to the other side of the lane, whispering like he's contagious. You sit beside him. At first nothing, then a deep breath like pulling a bucket up from a very dark well. "You came to the shed," he says. You nod. "I thought I imagined," that he murmurs, like everything else. His voice cracks. You don't rush him. The prayers he continues. "They made me say things, over and over, as if that would fix it. But I didn't need to confess. I needed to cry. And there it is. Not rage, not madness. Grief. Raw, untended, still bleeding. They thought the devil was in me," he says. "But it was just loss." Historians still argue whether the Church's dominance over mental suffering in the Middle Ages helped codify healing or stifled it. For people like Tomlin, the answer often depended on whether they were allowed to speak for themselves. You ask if he wants company. He nods. So you sit, two people sharing Space Nut solutions. Later, he asks for your help repairing a wheel. His hands shake at first, but they remember. Muscle memory is kind. The rhythm calms him. That night you bring him soup. He doesn't eat much, but he thanks you. "Everyone thinks I'm better," he says, "because I'm quiet again." You ask, "Are you?" He shrugs. "No, but I've learned how to look like it." You tell him you understand. He looks up, eyes sharp, for the first time in days. You think this is how healing begins, not with loud declarations or dramatic moments, but with someone being seen, heard, allowed to be even when broken. The next morning Tomlin walks with you to Celia's. She gives him a root to hold. "Lemon balm," she says. "Not magic, but it listens." He chuckles. First time you've heard it since his wife died. You leave him in the garden, turning the plant over in his hands, like a puzzle he's almost solved. Later a boy in the village falls from a roof. His leg is fine, but his pride is bruised, and he sobs in the square, wailing louder than his actual injury seems to warrant. People scoff. Too soft. He'll never last winter. You kneel beside him, offer a stone. Sometimes you whisper, "Crying is how we teach our hearts not to burst." He quiets, clutches the stone, not because it fixes him, but because someone let him feel without shame. That night you visit Tomlin again. You find a carving beside your door, a little wooden heart, chipped but still whole. You add it to the shelf. The bird, the flame, the heart. Your altar of resilience grows. You sleep easily. Not dreamless, but softer. Like your mind knows it doesn't have to shout anymore. It starts with a howl. Not a wolf, not even an animal. A woman. You sit up in bed, heart hammering. The sound claws through the dark like a knife through wet cloth long unbroken raw. Then silence. Then again. By the third cry, the whole village is awake. You pull on your cloak and follow the flicker of torches toward the edge of the commons, where the widow Aldreda stands barefoot in the frost, hair-loose nightdress soaked in mud and dew. She isn't screaming words, just noise. The kind born deep in the chest. The kind people try to bury until it boils over. A few villagers stand back, arms crossed. A couple whisper about curses. She's gone mad. She always was strange after her son. Someone else she needs, the priest. But you don't move, because you see what they don't. She's not breaking down. She's breaking open. Aldreda lost her only child 3 months ago. A fever. Fast and brutal. People brought her food, said their condolences, and moved on. But grief doesn't keep to the village clock. She drops to her knees, the sound stops. But her shoulders quake like the grief is still echoing inside her. You step forward. The priest tries to stop you. She's in spiritual crisis, he warns. She needs holy words. She needs to wail, you reply. He scowls. You kneel beside her. She's trembling not from cold, but from everything else. She doesn't look at you, but she doesn't move away either. You reach out gently and touch her hand. It's ice. You take off your cloak and wrap it around her shoulders. She leans into you. Not because she recognizes you, but because her body's finally found a place it's allowed to collapse. Historians still argue whether these wild displays of emotion were seen as madness or tolerated expressions of female grief. In some places, professional mourners were even hired to scream and cry on behalf of families. But when it was personal, uncontrolled, unsanctioned, it became threatening. Too much noise from a woman could get you labelled a witch. Or worse. The villagers stand uncertain. No one steps closer. But they don't drag her away either. Eventually Aldreda speaks. I held his hand, she whispers, and it still didn't save him. You squeeze hers. No answer will ever be enough. But presence is something. You help her to her feet. Celia arrives with tea and a rough wool blanket. Between the three of you, Aldreda is led back home. She doesn't talk again that night, but her eyes are clearer. The next day, the village pretends it didn't happen. People nod at Eldreda in the market. No mention of the howling. No mention of the grief. But she walks straighter, and she buys apples, and she makes a joke about the priest's cough. She's not back, but she's here, and that's enough. Later you visit her. She's knitting. I don't remember screaming, she says. You smile, you don't have to. I feel lighter, she adds. Like I let something out that was rotting in me. You understand. You ask if you can sit. She nods. Want to learn to knit. You try. You're terrible. But you laugh, together. And that night she gives you something. A tiny lumpy square of wool. For your shelf, she says. For the ones who howl. You place it beside the heart. The bird. The flame. And you light a candle for every time someone was told to hush when their soul needed to scream. The wind has changed. You feel it before you hear it. Cold sliding under the doorframe, the kind of chill that makes you pull your blanket tighter, even before you're fully awake. Outside, the trees bend low, their branches whispering secrets you're not meant to understand. You step outside and see a small group gathered near the chapel. A stranger has arrived. He wears robes not quite monk, not quite noble. A long grey scarf whips behind him in the wind, and he holds a staff carved with spirals. His hair is white, but his eyes burn sharp. He says he's from the House of Healing in the north, one of those rare monasteries rumoured to care for the soul as much as the body. He introduces himself as Brother Imric. The priest doesn't look pleased, but Imric is polite. He listens carefully to every question, answers each one with a tilt of the head, a thoughtful pause. He speaks of balance of stillness, of inner storms. He uses words you rarely hear from men of the cloth words like gentle and grace. The villagers don't know what to make of him. You are intrigued. You ask him about madness. He smiles. The word we use when we don't know how to sit with discomfort. You walk with him through the frostbitten garden. He points to the sky. There is a rhythm, he says. Just as the moon waxes and wanes, so does the spirit. We are not meant to be constant. You blink. So the mind is supposed to change. Everything does, he replies. To demand stillness from a living soul is to ask a tree not to grow. It's such a simple sentence, and yet it feels like someone just took a lock off your chest. Brother Imric explains that in his monastery they practice what they call quiet rooms, not prisons, not cells, but warm spaces for those whose minds are in chaos. No punishments, just silence, herbs, music, gentle company. Historians still debate whether such places ever truly existed, or if they were idealized visions written into text to imagine a gentler world. But as Imric speaks, you want to believe. You ask if he's ever struggled. He looks away, then says softly, I once could not sleep for 20 nights. The thoughts would not let me. I believed the stars were laughing at me. What helped? Someone sat beside me, said nothing, just stayed. You nod. Because of course that would be the thing. That night Imric offers to lead a small gathering by candlelight. No preaching, no prayers, just breath and stillness. He calls it listening to the bones. You sit on the cold floor of the chapel with 8 others, including Cilia and Eldreda, and even Tomlin, who hasn't looked anyone in the eye in weeks. Imric speaks softly. Breathe in what hurts. Breathe out what cannot stay. You try, and though your mind wanders back to dreams, to fears, to fog, you feel a shift. Not grand, but enough. Afterward no one speaks for a long time, and when they do, it's not about madness or sin or healing. It's about the taste of mint in the tea, the way the candlelight danced, the sound of a cat settling against someone's foot. You think maybe this is what peace looks like. Not absence of pain, but space for it. You walk home with Imric's words in your head. To demand stillness from a living soul is to ask a tree not to grow. You look at your shelf, the bird, the flame, the heart, the wool square. You add a stone, plain smooth but solid. You whisper for the ones who stayed. Then you blow out the candle, and the wind, though cold, feels no longer sharp. Just present, like a breath you've been holding finally exhaled. Winter comes hard. Not the gentle postcard kind, with snowflakes and cosy fires. This is the kind of winter that gnaws at doors, splits wood, and makes the chickens forget how to lay eggs. The kind that gets inside your thoughts, sharpens every worry, and hums a slow, low song of dread. The kind of winter that tests you. At first the village holds together, people share what they can. The baker gives out stale loaves, the blacksmith fixes hinges for free. But by the second week of frozen wells and brittle toes, people begin to fray. And that's when they turn on Lena. She's a mother of 4, husband lost at sea 2 summers ago. She's always been odd, they say. Sings to a broom. Lets her children run barefoot through the frost. laughs too loud or not at all, and lately she's been talking to herself again. You see her one morning rocking in front of her house, arms wrapped around a pot that clearly holds nothing. She's whispering lullabies to it like it's a baby. The village whispers back. She's snapped. She's dangerous. She's cursed. You try to speak to her. She smiles vaguely. He's still here, she says. He never left. Just quieter now. You ask gently who he is. She hugs the pot tighter. My little one. The one who didn't make it. And your heart clenches. Because you know. Not just what she means, but what comes next. This is the part where someone knocks on the priest's door. Where someone suggests confinement. Where someone uses the word unfit. You turn to Celia. We can't let them take her. Celia's already packing a basket. You bring Lena tea laced with chamomile and valerian. You speak softly. You sit with her holding the cold pot as she sings. You don't say he's gone. You say he was real. He mattered. Because what she's doing isn't dangerous. It's grief disguised as ritual. And who says rituals have to make sense? In fact, historians still debate how much medieval communities tolerated eccentric mourning before labelling it madness. The line was thin and usually drawn by whoever shouted loudest. But Lena is not violent. She's not shouting. She's just holding on. So you hold space. Others don't. A few men come 3 nights later with rope. They say she needs rest. You intercept them. She's not harming anyone, you argue. They scoff. She's not right. She's scaring the children. You raise your voice, then teach your children compassion. They hesitate, because you're not alone. Tomlin steps out from the shadows, arms crossed. Aldrida appears behind you, wild hair tied with ribbon. Even the scribe, the quietest man in the village, says, "Let her be. We've all cracked a little." Eventually the men back down, not because they understand, but because they've been outnumbered by those who do. That night you and Celia help Lena carry the pot inside. You place it gently near the hearth, wrap it in cloth and call it his place. You don't know if she'll ever let go, but you know she doesn't have to today. You add something new to your shelf, a small pot carved from wood. You paint it with dots. You tuck inside a dry sprig of rosemary and a scrap of cloth with nothing written on it. It's not a toy, it's a memory, and it deserves its own space. You sit by the fire and watch the flames blur. Outside the wind screams. Inside someone hums. And for the first time in days you feel warmth not just on your skin but in your bones. Because kindness can be a fire too. The snow melts and stutters. Not all at once. It drips and lingers, hesitating in the shade. The village returns in pieces, boots reappear in mud, voices rise in morning air, and windows open just enough to let in the thaw. You walk to the stream and see signs of the world waking up, moss creeping green again, bees testing the air, a bird singing like it's forgotten winter altogether. And then you hear her laughter. Thea, she's chasing shadows again, this time with a ribbon on a stick. She twirls and dances across the patchy grass barefoot, of course. Cor runs behind her, mimicking her every move. But something's different. She's humming. Not the haunted kind of sound she used to make, not the same 3 notes on repeat. This is a melody. Loose, playful, alive. You join them. She lets you hold the ribbon for a moment, and when you hand it back, she says it feels lighter now. You don't ask what it is. You know, later you pass Brother Imric near the well. He's leaning on his staff, watching the sky. It's the time of balance, he says. Spring is a hinge. A mind can swing either way. You nod. Is that dangerous? It's living, he replies. Dangerous is pretending it doesn't swing at all. You sit with that. Celia finds you in the square and hands you a sprig of mint. For renewal, she says, and stomach aches which tend to follow both. She smiles wider. There's something coming. A festival. But not for saints this time. You raise an eyebrow. She winks. And a week later it begins. A gathering but not sanctioned. Not religious. Just real. The fire is smaller. The music is homemade. The food is humble. But the point isn't spectacle. It's recognition. People bring something that symbolizes their own dark season. A carving, a stone, a piece of thread. They place it in the center circle, and then one by one they speak not full stories, just pieces. My son didn't make it. I stopped talking for a while. I hear voices. I've learned how to talk back. I still wake up with dread, but I now know why. Even the priest speaks. Just once. I used to think sorrow was a sin he admits. Now I think silence is. Imric bows his head. You feel the air shift. You step forward. Place your bird in the circle. And say only this. I didn't always want to live, but I kept making tea. That's all. And it's enough. Historians might one day read about these moments in footnotes, small village customs, unsanctioned rituals of healing. They'll wonder what they meant, how they began, whether they helped. They did. That night no one sleeps early. There's too much warmth, too much light. People sing, not perfectly, not in tune, but with heart. Thea dances. Tomlin carves. Aldrida passes out wool hearts she knitted. Even Lena smiles. You sit with Celia, legs curled under you, and ask what this gathering should be called. She thinks. Not madness, not grief, not healing, just... And then she says, the long night's end. You like that. It doesn't promise a cure. Just a morning. You place one last item on your shelf when you return home a ribbon. Frayed sun-bleached caught once in Thea's spinning. Then you write. Even wild hearts need daylight. Let the hinge swing. And you finally sleep, not because you're finished healing, but because you no longer fear the dark. You've met it. You've sat with it. And you know how to walk through. You wake to birdsong, not the frantic warning kind, the gentle chirps of birds just announcing themselves. The world hums like it's been tuned slightly higher overnight. Even the dust in your window glows differently. You stretch, pull the curtain aside, and see the village bathed in gold. There's laundry on lines. There's steam rising from kettles. There's the sweet low sound of someone humming while sweeping a stoop, and beneath it all a quiet truth. People have survived. You step outside and breathe deep. The air smells of earth, mud and mint and the faint bite of wood smoke. You carry your tea out to your stool and sit beside your shelf. The bird, the flame, the heart, the wool square, the pot, the stone, the ribbon. Artifacts really, not of war, not of saints. Of persistence, of mental storms weathered. Celia arrives not long after, bearing honey bread and an invitation. We're having a little gathering, she says. A circle. Not like the last one, smaller. Just us. You nod. You walk with her through fields turning green again. At the edge of the old orchard you see the others. Aldrida has brought a stool. Tomlin's whittling. Lena carries her pot, not like a relic now, but a part of her. Even Thea is there, her feet muddy, her smile a little easier. Brother Imric stands under the apple tree, hands folded in front of him. We speak today not to be cured, he says softly, but to be witnessed. So you begin. Not all at once. Not like a confessional, just slowly, like roots finding new earth. Someone talks about fear. Another about guilt. A third about not feeling anything at all and how that strangely hurt more than sadness. You share your own piece. Sometimes I still wake in a panic even though nothing's wrong. And I don't always know how to tell the difference. No one tries to fix you. They just nod. Because they understand. Historians still argue whether medieval communities ever created safe spaces for the mind. Maybe not formally. But you think here under this tree with this circle of people stitched together by pain and empathy, you've found something close. You stay until the light begins to fade. Then someone suggests burying the hardest part of the season. A symbolic act. So one by one you each place something into a shallow hole beneath the tree, a stone, a scrap of cloth, a brittle twig. You hesitate. Then you take the small flame carving from your pocket. It's chipped, burnt at one edge. You whisper, "Thank you for carrying me." Then you place it in the earth. Not to forget, but to grow from. Later Celia gives you a seedling. Lemon balm, she says, for memory and peace. You plant it near your doorstep. Water it with the last of your tea. That night you light a candle and sit quietly. You trace the grain in the wood of your shelf. You think of all the ways your mind tried to break you and how you didn't let it. Or maybe you did. But you put the pieces back, not the same. Never the same, but strong in a different shape. You write. The long night ends more than once. Let it end as often as it needs. And if it returns, light the candle again. You sleep with your window open. The wind is soft now, like breath on the back of your neck. Like a lullaby hummed just out of reach. The days are longer now. You wake before the sun, sometimes not because you're anxious, but because you want to watch the light arrive. It begins as a whisper across your wall, then grows, warms, fills the corners. You stretch slowly, no panic, no dread. Just space. Space in your lungs, space in your mind, space for being. You walk barefoot to your doorstep and see the lemon balm growing strong, green, sturdy, reaching. You crush a leaf between your fingers and breathe it in. A reminder not all growth is visible from the outside. You sip your tea beside your shelf. The bird, the heart, the wool square, the ribbon, the pot, the stone, all there. A quiet map of a journey others never saw but you lived. You survived not because someone gave you a cure, but because you made room inside your own story. You hear footsteps and look up. Thea and Cor arrive laughing. She carries a handful of dandelions. Cor's face is painted with charcoal. He says he's a crow today. You nod solemnly. Very convincing. Aldrida joins you not long after with a loaf of fresh bread. She sits beside you like she always has. I still cry, she says, no shame in her voice. You nod. Good. Tomlin passes through, later whistling. The melody is rough, a little crooked, but it's there. Brother Imric is leaving soon. He says another village needs his voice. But he gives you one last thing before he goes, a smooth piece of ashwood carved in a spiral. For when your thoughts circle too tightly, he says, let this remind you spirals always widen eventually. You thank him. You place it on the shelf. Then one evening, as the sun bleeds gold into violet, you walk to the edge of the woods. Celia is there waiting. She lights a small fire no bigger than your palm. This, she says, is for all the stories we didn't get to tell. All the people who are misunderstood or punished or silenced. You nod. You both sit in silence watching the fire dance. You remember some of them. The man locked away for muttering to the wind. The woman who wove her grief into song and was called dangerous. The child who never spoke and so was forgotten. They mattered. Their minds mattered. And here under stars and smoke you honour them. You scatter lavender into the flame. And it smells like peace. Later that night, as the world hushes and the sky presses close, you return home. The candles flickering low, your breath is slow, your thoughts gentle. You add one last entry to your little book. Madness was never the monster. Silence was, but now I speak. You close the book, slide it beneath your pillow, lie down, and this time when sleep comes it does not feel like drowning. It feels like floating, drifting down into something safe, soft, held. So now you let yourself drift. Let the candle's flame in your mind grow small, not because it's fading, but because the room no longer needs so much light. Everything you needed to see has been seen. Every corner of the journey you feared to enter, you walked through it. Slowly. Honestly. You saw what madness looked like in the medieval world, not as a monster in the woods, but as 1,000 quiet heartbreaks, misunderstood rituals and voices that deserved more than fear. You felt the weight of those who lived at the edge of society's comfort, and the gentle rebellion of those who listened instead of locking things away. The minds of the past weren't weaker or wilder. They were human. Like yours, and like you they carried hope inside the stranger storms. So now rest. Let your breath move like a tide, long, slow, and even. Let the flicker of memory soften. Let the names and faces of those we met slip gently into the dark, not forgotten, but peacefully placed. The bird still watches. The flame still burns. The heart still beats. And you are still here. You made it. You're safe. You're home. Now let yourself fall just a little deeper. Let the hush wrap around you. And if dreams come, let them be kind. You don't have to remember this all tomorrow, but your body will. It always does. End of script, sweet dreams.